إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد Alhamdulillah, we begin by thanking Allah, praising Him, sending peace and blessings upon His noble messenger Muhammad. So there was once a young man who was in his early 20s, this is a true story, who went to his teacher, went to his Shaykh to complain and to say, "Ya Shaykh, I don't own a house and I make very little income. I don't make enough money to buy a house." Many of us today see the real estate market. Maybe we can relate that in his time, even though this was in the past, this young man said, "I don't know how I'll ever own a house, and I don't make enough money to own a house. How will I ever get married?" This is the question that this young man asked the Shaykh. So the Shaykh looked at him and said, "Have taqwa." And the young man said, how am I going to use taqwa to buy a house? So the young man went home and he began to think, this Shaykh is older than me. He's a wise man. So I'm going to take his advice and see what happens. So he said, I forgot about trying to buy a house. And I just focused on taqwa. And what's taqwa? We all know taqwa is to be aware of Allah Azza wa Jal. Taqwa is to live a life conscious of Him Azza wa Jal in every decision we make. So the young man, he resolved to avoid some of the things he used to engage in, and even in his job, right? And so I'll tell you, he used to work in a real estate company, and he was an agent. And so even in his job, he kept Allah in his mind in how he dealt with clients. When he came into work, when he left, he was more sincere. And the owner of the company, he could tell that this individual is a bit different from the others. He's changed, something happened. Months went on, and this young man is committed to taqwa, to being aware that Allah is with him. If he's in a meeting, even if it's in business, Allah is watching. After 6-7 months, the owner noticed business is booming. And he noticed that all of this wealth that's being generated is coming from this individual. So the owner, again, true story. The owner, he went to this young man and he told him, I want you to help me find a home for my family. Because you know more about the market now. I want you to help me find a home for my family. So the young man began to look for him, and they began to look at some homes, and it took a couple of months, and they found a beautiful home. It was a bit expensive, but this is the home that the young man recommended the owner. Now the owner, he had a daughter, okay? So he invited, once he decided to buy this house, and he was so happy, and he wanted to honor this young man, he said, I want to invite you and your family over for dinner. So they went over for dinner. And the goal of this business owner was he wanted this young man, this young employee in his company, to see his daughter. And these were both religious families, so that they would see each other and see what happens. After the dinner, the owner noticed that his daughter likes this young man. And he went and spoke with this young man and found that he's also interested. And so the owner told him that I would like you to get married to my daughter, if you agree. And he says yes. And then he says, and I also want to give you this home as a gift for you and my daughter. Now this is a true story of taqwa, of how this shaykh told this man, whatever problem you have, you don't feel like you can ever afford a home, your salary isn't enough, focus on your relationship with Allah Azza wa Jal, and Allah will change the world for you. The shaykh told this individual the ayah, بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن يتق الله يجعل له مخرجا ويرزقه من حيث لا يحتسب. Whoever has taqwa of Allah, what does Allah do? He opens the door and He grants him wealth from places he will never expect. And this is exactly what happened. And this young man, he calls up the shaykh and he says, Subhanallah, I focused on taqwa and now I have a home and now, alhamdulillah, I'm married. We are about 3 weeks away from Ramadan. And I know sometimes, especially in interfaith gatherings and in different gatherings, if we're ever asked about what the purpose of Ramadan is, why does Allah have us fast for 30 days? Sometimes we say, so that we can experience how those in need feel not having food and drink. But that's not actually the reason why Allah gave us Ramadan. That could be a wisdom, but Allah Azza wa Jal tells us the exact reason for why we are to fast Ramadan every year. He says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. He says that fasting was prescribed for you just as it was prescribed for people before you. The Christians, the Jews, those who follow, even Christians and Jews today have forms of fasting, right? But prophets in the past, communities in the past, they all had forms of fasting. But what's the main purpose? The main purpose is to develop taqwa. Now the question that we should ask ourselves is, what is the relationship between avoiding food and drink and increasing in our God consciousness? Fasting is one of the most sincere acts that a person can do. You know this. No one truly knows whether or not you're fasting, except for Allah Azza wa Jalla. We can act like it, right? We can get up for suhoor and we can have dinner, but who really knows? Yourself and Allah Azza wa Jalla. I remember when I was young, like in 5th grade, and I went to a public school. I was one of the only kids fasting, right? But I would walk by the water fountain, and I would sometimes pause and be like, I drank some water right now. Nobody would know. My mom wouldn't know. No one would know. But Allah would know, and this is what we're trying to develop. And outside of Ramadan, in Ramadan and outside of Ramadan, does anyone truly know if we are righteous or not? You know the one who knows us the best? Allah. Even our spouses, your spouse, you may think you know your spouse, even if you've been married to them for 20, 30 years. And they may think that they know you. But do they know what's inside? Sometimes maybe even something you think about that they would never know. Or something maybe you do in secret that they would never know about. But who knows about it? Allah Azza wa Jal. And so Ramadan is a reminder that when you avoid the halal, food and drink, which is usually halal, and you train yourself, yes, I can control myself and truly avoid it. Even if no one's watching me, Allah is watching me, then outside of Ramadan, those things that are haram, those things that have a punishment tied to them, it's easier for us to avoid. The Egyptians have a really beautiful saying. So some of you Egyptians here may know this, but some may not know, like, it's linguistic kind of, you could say, wisdoms. They say, خلي بالك من نفسك. You guys heard this? خلي بالك من نفسك. Which usually is said, to express like, take care of yourself, be careful, watch out, خلي بالك من نفسك, take care of yourself. But if you look at it linguistically, what it really means linguistically is خلي بالك, empty your mind, خلي تخلية, empty your mind of your nafs. خلي بالك, empty your mind of yourself. And this is what Ramadan is supposed to teach us. Don't let your nafs occupy your mind and be the thing that makes decisions for you. Make sense? When you make decisions, lower your nafs. Because the nafs, what does it want? It seeks pleasure all the time. It always wants pleasure, whether it's halal or haram. So خلي بالك من نفسك. I was recently invited, and I'll conclude the first khutbah like this. I was recently invited to actually a few programs about phone addiction and what they call brain rot in these days. People scrolling one video to the next until they say, their brain will rot. And I was thinking, like, what will I talk about? And I immediately thought of a hadith in the Sunan of Abi Dawood, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, حُبُّكَ الشَّيْءِ يُعْمِي وَيُصِمْ, which means your love of something will blind you and make you deaf. It will cause blindness and deafness. And so I'm thinking I need to talk to people who, like many of us, are addicted to our phones and in love with our phones and with our social media and with our messages and all of this stuff. How can I even talk about it? And so this is just a message for all of us. What are the things in our life that we love that have blinded us, that have caused us deafness, where we can't even receive advice from others? We're just passionately in love. Our nafs is in love with this thing. And is it something that Allah would be happy with or not? We want to make an active intention before Ramadan to keep Allah in mind as we make decisions. Not just our nafs, not just that which gives us pleasure. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله وصلى الله على سيدنا وحبيبنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Some of our ulama, they say taqwa is levels. Taqwa has levels. And all levels are good. Let's start with that. But some of the ulama, they say there are 3 levels of taqwa. Now, every single one of us is at a level. And I want us to think about which level are we in and which level do we want to be in, especially as we go through Ramadan. Level number 1 is the level of avoiding the haram and doing those things that are good simply because we don't want to be punished in Jahannam and because we want to be in Jannah, right? Some of us are at that level, and Allah knows that. That's why Allah in Al-Quran Al-Kareem, on almost every single page, Allah talks about Jannah and its beauty and its enjoyment, and talks about Jahannam and its punishment. Because Allah knows some of us just need that. That yes, I want to do this thing, but I don't want to be burned for eternity. Yes, or no, I don't want to do this thing. That's obligatory on me. But I want Jannah. I want to be in eternal enjoyment. That's one level of taqwa. Some of us may be at this level. It's not the highest level though. There's a sort of funny story. I don't know its authenticity, but they say one of the early women of scholarship, Islam, Sharia, her name was Rabi al-Adawiyya, one of the early figures. They say that she once ran outside with a bucket of water and a torch fire. And she started running down the street and she said, I want to pour this bucket on Jahannam. And I want to put this torch to the garden. And the people are like, what are you talking about? And she's saying, we need to stop worshiping just to get pleasure in Jannah and simply to avoid the fire. We need to worship because Allah deserves it. We need to worship because we should love Allah. This was her message, and she was trying to do it figuratively. But still, this level of only worshiping Allah, only obeying Allah because we want to avoid harm and we want pleasure is acceptable. Now, what's a higher level? The ulama say there's a level of taqwa where a person realizes that obeying Allah, avoiding the haram actually brings pleasure in the heart, in the dunya, peace and contentment and happiness. So this is a higher level, that a person avoids that which he should avoid and does that which they should do so that they get that peace and contentment in their heart. But what happens? Let's say a person starts praying Qiyamul Layl. And in the beginning they taste that sweetness. But then it goes away and it becomes difficult. What happens then? They leave it. They leave the Qiyamul Layl because it's not bringing them that happiness and that peace that they were looking for example. So then the third level of taqwa, and this is the one that Rabi'a sort of alluded to, which is that a person avoids the haram and a person does that which they should do to obey Allah Azza wa Jal because they realize they have a God, a creator that deserves their worship and that deserves their obedience, and that they are shy. They are shy even when they are alone to do something, to do something that will look bad to their creator. And they never forget him. And so it's not just, I want to be in Jannah, I want to avoid Jahannam. It's not just, I want to feel the sweetness. If I come to the masjid for Isha and I don't feel something, I'm just not going to come. That's not their goal, you see? Their goal is, Ya Allah, you want me to do this? Even if it's hard, even if it's difficult, even if it doesn't bring them pleasure, you deserve that worship, Ya Allah. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to grant us taqwa. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to allow us to make the month of Ramadan, to be there fasting with pure hearts, to forgive all of the people, anyone who's harmed us before this month, so that we enter it with a pure heart. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب رب اغفر لي ولوالدي رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين أقم الصلاة